And now, the Experience Matters panel discussion, moderated by Akshay Sharma of Gartner.
Thank you, GENBAND, for inviting a great panel here. Oh, we just got another speaker, so we're doing things in real time as we speak. So thank you, Charlie. What an event last night. This is probably my fourth or fifth event. Okay, here's some background noise. This is probably my fourth or fifth event. I was actually at the Next Point Networks event in Boca. I remember great discussions with some people that are still here, so it's great, and look forward to continued discussions. I think David Walsh was the other keynote speaker at that time, so this is great. So what we're going to talk about is experience matters. Experience can mean many things from many different people. User experience, experience of networks. And so we've got a great panel here, and I'm going to introduce Paul Davis, who's coming right now. Paul Davis is Vice President at Polycom. From IBM, we have John Del Pizzo. From Waste Management, we have Mark Madsen. From GENBAND, we have Shalin Sehgal. And from M-Portal, we have DP Venkatesh. So I'm going to kickstart the discussion with some background. We've heard about cloud, and all I know is it was raining a couple of nights ago, and now it's raining again. So what is cloud? We at Gartner, I'm a Gartner analyst. I'm sure you've heard of the Gartner Group. We're an analyst firm. Been in the industry 24 years. Actually started out working as an engineer on the DMS 100 at Nortel up in Ottawa, B&R Carling. So if any of you are from Ottawa, I say hi. Also worked in Bell Canada. I was a manager of networks engineering, and I've also been in the soft switch and voice over IP arena. And so now I'm an analyst. I'm a research director at Gartner, and we do research in technology. And one of the things I did is I thought, I've heard this term cloud so many times, like, really, we sort of know what it is, but let's put some definition behind it, because I hear about scalability, elasticity, multi-tenancy. Maybe it's metered usage, pay as you grow. We're seeing new notions of cloud services brokering. We see things like software-defined networking we heard from Mark Pugarud this morning. And how does that fit into the cloud? And all these different terms. So we're in this transition period, and does experience matter? We're seeing lots of applications that have gone into the cloud. Some of them are consumer-centric, some are process-centric, some of them are interactive, some of them have low latency requirements. What are the types of applications should you go to the cloud first with? And does a carrier fit in this mode? How does a carrier, we could see carriers doing social, perhaps maybe a WebRTC type app for voice calling. We could see a carrier fit in with security as a service. But traditionally, we've seen over-the-top providers doing a lot of the rest of the stuff. So we at Gartner, we coined a term called the nexus of forces, where we basically have identified a few pillars. Cloud, information. Well, information is really analytics. Social and mobile. And we believe that it's the convergence of all of these different functions or different concepts that mutually reinforce each other and we'll build a new breed of applications. We went from siloed protocols, siloed products, where the user experience was the last thing we thought of. You know, oh, we had to build a switch. We got this ISDN pipe. Oh, we got to build a phone. I remember back in '89, I'm dating myself here, I actually worked in meetings at Nortel where we were talking about the P phone back then, and then the ISDN phone. But it was usually thinking of the protocol or the network first, and the user interface was the last thing we figured out. But now in the cloud world, it's the opposite. We think of the user interface first, and the cloud guys don't think of the network. And so we have this new style of development. In the cloud world, they call it DevOps, where you design for recoverability, but it may not be fully baked. You know, you call it a beta. You know, Gmail was a beta for a few years. So with that in mind, we've got a distinguished panel here, and I'd like to get, you know, your perspectives on where we are going with this. So perhaps, first question I'll ask, DP, you're a CEO of a company, mPortal. You've got applications with video, I believe. I think your solutions were tied with the Oscars, and also you have partnerships with Disney. Where do you see yourself fitting into this equation?
Thanks, Akshay. First of all, I'd like to thank GENBAND and the team for inviting me to this event. It's been great. To us, I think the way we look at the world is, you know, you talked about siloed development that traditionally the telecom industry has followed. We see everything as an interconnected world where there's the device layer, the network layer, and the application layer. And the consumer or the user is the first phase of every product that we talk about. So we're not talking about the network layer, we're not talking about the device. First we say, what is it that makes the user want a product? I think the best example that I've seen in the telecom industry is with the iPhone and with Apple, but not really the product, but a service, is visual voicemail. And everyone in the telecom industry was very upset because Steve Jobs came out and said, we invented voicemail. And the truth is, they didn't invent it. It's been around for 20 years. And what Apple did was really focus on a single fact, which was what consumers were looking for is who called me and which voicemail can I listen to first. So if I get a voicemail from Shalin, then I get a voicemail from John, the ability to just select one feature was all that they really touted. Now, did it take everything else? I mean, did you still need a voicemail server? Did you need stuff in the cloud? Did you need stuff on the device? Yes, but the entire focus was around user experience. So we really believe that at the end of the day, whatever services are being launched, without understanding the consumer-facing or the business user-facing interface point, I think you run into a lot of troubles because you're over-engineering things, which, as we know as an industry, we tend to do.
Now, given that, you know, Steve Jobs, truly a genius. I mean, he figured out the user interface first and then told the engineers, go make it happen. Given that, Shalin, I know you're running the Multimedia business unit at GENBAND. How do you see user interface or user experience mattering in this equation?
So, excuse me, actually BG runs the Multimedia unit. I am the product manager, so I can say I perhaps am the brains behind him. So okay. I'm just getting credit for myself. So let me start by saying that I think experience is the killer app. So with that theme in mind, what we have done, we are building now products keeping experience in mind first, which means we start with the wireframe, we create a mock-up, we go to the CMOs, we socialize it to them, and then we go ahead and build the product and the APIs and the network and the core afterwards. So hence, the sheer fact that we are focusing on experience is changing the way we are building products now.
And Mark, you run the IT group at Waste Management, but I understand with Samsung, you're going to put new devices for all the people that are out in the field so that you can have new location services and presence. How do you see experience mattering in your neck of the woods?
I think that experience will make or break an application. If you don't produce wireframes initially. If you don't produce a mock-up of the UI and get user input before the application's developed, your application's gonna fail. Users need to be a part of it. You have to build apps that are simple to use. We talked about the iPhone, Android. You can download an app. People can use it in an instant. If it's complicated and buggy, users won't adopt the application. We're rolling out 20,000 devices to all of our trucks, and we have to train all of our drivers to use an application. In many cases, drivers do not have a college degree, and you've got to make the application very easy to use. And that they use it from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day.
And what are the types of apps? Will it be messaging? Will it be...
Yeah, so some of the functionality of the applications include the route sheets. Where do drivers need to go to actually pick up the waste? It includes functionality for drivers to message dispatch when there's an issue in servicing the customer. It includes mapping, presence. We have the ability to issue what we call a hot ticket, which is if we missed a customer, we can send a ticket to a driver who's nearest by, and we can route them over there. It includes functionality to take the truck to a transfer station or to a landfill, get the weight, and all the pre and post checkout routines. We're looking to add additional capabilities. We're looking to add additional capabilities around actual voice. Drivers can take a picture and send pictures into dispatch as well.
Great, so that's the perfect segue to John at IBM. As you know, communications-enabled business processes, or CEBP, that concept's been around, at least I've heard it back in 2003, but how does this workflow that Mark has, how does that fit in within IBM's world? I mean...
Well, so the major initiative at IBM is something called social business. And the driver there is how do you take all the new social techniques and principles we're learning in our personal lives and apply them specifically to the business process? And how do you revamp the way you do things in order to be more effective and more efficient? And I'll take a slightly different, more expansive view of experience. I think your experience is a reflection of and is driven by the way that you do business, the way that you're built internally. And I was telling several of you, I couldn't be here on Monday and Tuesday because I bought a new home on Monday. So as you can imagine, we've been enjoying the mortgage application process and the Patriot Act and all of those sorts of wonderful things. And the bank that I was working with, very well-known, reputable bank, has a great website and a phenomenal mobile app. Yet when we started actually going through the process, they wanted me to print out forms, sign them, and fax them back. We're in a world of digital signatures, and yet we're still faxing things into them. There was no secure upload through their browser website. I couldn't. They wanted me to email them the documents, and they wanted them to be unencrypted because if they were encrypted, they'd have to print them out themselves and then scan them back in to make PDFs to put into their system. So when you think about the experience, it's not just about the glitter that goes into like an iPhone app or that goes onto the website. Think about how you're exposing the way that you operate to your customers and how you want that overall experience to be. And that's what's so critical about mapping out your workflows and continually reinventing those workflows and leveraging some of the social capabilities and the communications capabilities to really refine them and expand them and build on them over time.
Now, would your life have been much better if, let's say, through this mortgage experience that you went through, if you could just use video conferencing and just maybe give a thumbs up, or maybe it's recorded and you digitally sign things?
Actually, it's a great point. They wanted to do everything with me over the phone. And I travel a great deal. I'm meeting with customers all the time. And when I'm not traveling, I'm on the phone with other people. It would have been great if the high priority items were done over the phone or through video, quite frankly, so they could see how frustrated I might have been getting with the experience. But it would have been good. I had to convince them to do more of the communication through email because I could reply to email when sitting on the tarmac waiting to take off, or when sitting at the train station and those sorts of things. They were not very open to the concept of shifting the modes of communication to better match what I was comfortable with and what I was able to most efficiently drive.
Now, speaking about conferencing, Paul, you're an executive at Polycom. How do you see Polycom helping in this regard?
So just a couple of things. First of all, you would think that in technology, most of us would be early adopters. I'm not. Polycom, as you know, is probably most known for the ubiquitous conference phone, which has increased the experience of so many of us out in the business world. I was really late coming to video conferencing from an end user perspective. Been very familiar with putting it out into networks with service providers and large enterprise. But about 2.5 years ago, I put a video device on my desk. Now, when you become an employee at Polycom, and I'll speak to this as from the enterprise perspective. When you become an employee at Polycom, you get a virtual meeting room as well as a telephone number and issued a PC along with all those other things. So there's 4,000 enabled video conference rooms inside of Polycom. In my experience as a sales guy over the last 30 years, I've never traveled less than 50,000 miles a year until 2.5 years ago. Because now all of my internal meetings are held via video. When I go to meet with a customer for the first or second time, I'll go in person. But even to your point about the contract signings and contract negotiations, those are all held over video now, either from the customer's virtual meeting room along with me, which allows input from various diverse devices, not just Polycom devices, so we're fully open standard. But also they could go into meeting rooms hosted by our service provider customers to reach me at my desk.
Now, I'll give you a data point. I'm sure things have improved now, but it's kind of funny. I just met an old coworker, Carl Baptiste. I think he's around here. We used to work at Convergent. I was based in the Sunrise, Florida office, and he was based in Lowell, Massachusetts. And there, because setting up the video conferencing was so tough, we'd actually have a dedicated room where the thing was always on. You just literally walked into the room and we were already set up to have a video conference. Now, how does user experience change now? I mean, that was literally 12 years ago, but is it literally like click-to-call kind of thing right now?
Our goal at Polycom with our partnership with GENBAND is to make video conferencing as simple as dialing a telephone number.
Wow.
And that's what it's going to be. And in many cases, with our service provider customers and our large enterprise customers as well, that's exactly what it is today. It's a 10-digit dial.
That's amazing. Now, DP, how does your solution, I mean, that you've deployed with video and with, you know, the Oscars that you have or Disney with an MVNO that you mentioned, how does that all play out from a user experience?
No, I think just going on to what Paul said, what we find is the right way to look at things is this morning and yesterday, you had GENBAND talk about the smart core, the smart edge, and then the smart experience. And I think you need to tie all of those together. So too often people think when you talk about experience, they say, oh, get some designer, it's UI, it's a couple of fancy swipes, or it's an icon, or it's a 3D image. But I think what we found consistently when we talk to customers is they're not looking for just a UI. They're looking for the entire experience of a service. The specific service that Akshay is referring to is we worked this year with ABC Disney in launching the second screen experience for the Oscars. So we had the ability, while you're watching television and the Oscars were on, we had live video streaming from the Oscars in California on second screen on mobile and tablets. So while you watch somebody getting an Oscar, say Ben Affleck's getting an Oscar or not getting an Oscar, you could actually choose to watch a different screen. You had a fashion camera, you had a red carpet camera. So you've pushed the experience and the decision-making out to the user. So what we really had to do was think through not just the UI, which was important, so people would use it, but we had to think through everything from what is the ability of the device to do video streaming? How does the codec work on iOS as opposed to Android? What if you don't have a certain kind of device? And what about, do you want to distract the user from the television because Disney is charging $1.5 million for a 30-second ad? So we had to think through the entire service and then work back from there from an experience perspective. I think where service providers are looking at is, there's a tendency to always say, I've heard the word dinosaur today like 5 times. And I like the word elephant better because I think the thing about elephants is they may be slower and they move, but when an elephant finally arrives, it's still an elephant. And I think the value of what service providers bring in terms of simple things like the address book, right? You look at Facebook, they have 1 billion people in quote unquote their address book. But you take an AT&T or a Verizon, they have 100 million people. An address book, I think in the telco world is always thought of as, oh, it's a list or it's a database. But where we see, when we talk about smart experience with GENBAND, we're seeing it as the central point of my entire social network. Everybody I call, everybody I do video conferencing with. So the applications and services that the mobile operators, the cable operators are looking for us to develop and work with them on is, how do you create services that consumers will pay for that are compelling? And that's not an easy question to answer. So I think we're looking at experience across all three. The core network has to support it, the edge has to be capable, and then at the end of the day, the smart experiences get people to use the service. Because too often we launch products that are great, and then after, I think the statistic is only 14% of apps actually are used after the first time.
So on that note, we heard about smart core, smart edge, smarter experience. Now I've heard about the smarter planet from IBM.
A little bit.
I mean, how does analytics play in all of this?
Analytics is crucial. I mean, Smarter Planet came out of the thought process that the world is becoming increasingly intelligent. We've got all of these devices with all of these sensors in them, whether they're in your phone or they're in the road telling you the traffic or monitoring the environment. It's increasingly interconnected, so we're linking all of these devices together. And how do you make sense of this massive amount of information that's flowing? And how do you pull out the relevant patterns for what you're attempting to accomplish? To that end, we've demonstrated things like Watson, which was the computer that was the Jeopardy champion a few years ago. And we've been applying tools like analytics to healthcare so that doctors can literally enter in some of the symptoms that they're seeing, and Watson will turn around and recommend, well, these are the likely diagnoses. Have you thought about the following sorts of things? So they can turn around and then look for interactions between drugs and everything and assist the doctor in reaching a diagnosis and helping a patient. And we're learning how to apply that same sort of capability to all sorts of other different vertical applications across industries. And that's what we hope will end up building a smarter planet.
Yeah.
Now, this morning we heard about WebRTC. Any ideas as to how you're going to fit that in? Perhaps Paul?
I think WebRTC is a critical component to spreading the ability for people to communicate. It's an easy, simple way. It will definitely impact our business. We believe that the more people that you can bring together, then the collaboration and the value to that really is going to be enhanced.
Now, Mark, you're a CIO of a major corporation. Does WebRTC play a role if you had like a click-to-call or a click-to-collaborate type button?
Yeah, certainly on two sides of the coin, on the employee side, but as well as our customers. So on the employee side, how do we facilitate video communication from the field to corporate? And then for our customers, go to our website, wm.com, log in, and if you want to actually video chat with a customer service representative, you'll be able to do that using technology like WebRTC.
And Shalin, do you see WebRTC allowing carriers to, in effect, become over the top in other regions?
Absolutely. In fact, we have use cases where we are working and creating these communication clients that are very thin, run on browsers that are supporting plugins at the moment, but they'll support natively the WebRTC. So we absolutely see use cases where roaming users who go and let's say they're on vacation and they want to call back. So they're able to log into their clients and see their directory and able to call as if they're dialing out of their own phone.
Now, you also mentioned, I think Mark Pugarud mentioned this morning, SDN and NFV. How does that fit in, Shalin? I mean, do you see a user experience element or any analytics being used to drive that?
So the way we are using SDN is to connect the managed network services component of the user experience back into the SPCs, and SPCs are the components that are going to be going into the software-defined network or NFV, as and when the Intel technology catches up.
So do you see, let's say Mother's Day is coming up, Call volumes probably will spike up.
Exactly.
And do you see like functions being dynamically allocated as you need it?
So absolutely. So what that should allow for is that you can now place critical functions like a session border controller or security into the cloud and into the elastic cloud, right? And so you do not have to, engineer capacity for the Mother's Day event.
Yep.
You don't need to over-engineer anymore. You can get just-in-time capacity.
So before, historically, we'd have siloed boxes where we would over-engineer based on so many Erlangs and so many busy hour call attempts. So now we might even go into a mode where we just buy as we need and pay as you grow.
Absolutely.
Do you see business models change? Like maybe you guys get paid per usage?
Absolutely, and that's one of the main reasons why we invested in the Nuvia cloud, was to enable, A, first to demonstrate that it could be done, and B, then enable people who want to first try our experience out before investing into their own CapEx.
And John, at IBM, you have UC as a service, you have same time. Do you see those type of elements being scaled with NFV or SDN concepts?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting, as IBM is working with our enterprise customers, what they're asking us for increasingly is to take over large chunks of that communications infrastructure from them. So we do the social, we do a lot of the video, we work with Polycom on the video, but increasingly they're saying, look, we want a phone number that comes from an IBM. And that's not traditionally part of the business that we've really been in. We've been working with folks like GENBAND to figure out how do we actually address that, how do we spin that up, and how do we mate that with the smart cloud initiatives that we have going on across the enterprise with some of our customers. So our engineering gurus are working with folks like GENBAND to understand how do we take advantage of those technologies and deliver those services.
And do you see these now becoming newer workflows in your CRM systems or your ERP systems, that WebRTC button gets tied in within one of these packages?
It's interesting because we're commenting a little earlier about the address book as being kind of the jumping off point. I actually look at it slightly differently. I think you live in a context. It might be your CRM app, it might be your mortgage application app, it could be your ERP. And especially within the enterprise, the major challenge is how do I find the people who can help me address the problem I've got right now? A common question over same time inside IBM is, I've got a problem with X. Who do you know that knows something about X? And they give you 2 or 3 people, and they give you 2 or 3 people. And instead, by embedding the communication services in the actual application that you're living in, you can bring the expertise location directly to the user when they have the problem. And then there's the jumping off point where you get to engage, whether it's voice or video or instant messaging or text or any other forms of communications, regardless of how where they happen to be.
Well, now we tend to jump. Literally, we'll go to a website, we'll find the, let's say, tech support number, we use another device to call them. We might take a picture and email it to using another portal, another set of applications, and you're literally running around like you had with your mortgage process.
Right.
And maybe in the future, you're in that one screen, that one website, that one web portal. You're sharing maybe the screen, you're sharing the context, you're uploading a document in it, you're taking a picture, you're calling, you're chatting, you're instant messaging, all within that one
Ideally,
user experience.
that experience should be completely seamless to the user. And you should be able to escalate or move across communication modalities depending upon what you're trying to achieve.
And within that context, does a Polycom video conference come into that equation as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the keys for us is to be able to communicate. Did I lose voice here? No? Okay. So one of the keys for us is being able to allow any place, anytime, any device. And so if you're in a large conference room, or if you need to get onto an immersive telepresence experience, if there are 6 people needing to talk at the same time or need to be on the same conference at the same time, some coming in via voice and some coming in via video, it's critical to the overall experience.
Now, how do you see the service provider fitting in? I mean, some service providers are just still selling basic telephony and basic internet. Do you see a service provider managing this and making it as a managed service offering? Maybe I'll ask DP, what do you think?
Sure. I think it varies from service provider to service provider, but I think at the end of the day, a couple of points. One was just going back to the single screen concept. I think there's a tendency to always look for a silver bullet. I'm not sure it's a single screen where you have video and voice and text. Sometimes it is. So I think from a service provider perspective, you work back to, what is the core business? There are some service providers that are mobile-only players, or some of them are converged players where you have a mobile service, you have a cable service, you have voice telephony or port service, and then decide where the differentiation is going to be for you as a service provider, and then build out that core competence and expand on it. Because I think in today's world, you have the ability to partner, you have the ability to, when you talk about SDN and you talk about elastic clouds, you don't actually have to own everything and build everything. I mean, the telecom industry has gone into a world where if you look at some of the large telcos and you say, okay, if you take a Vodafone or China Telecom, their CapEx budgets are humongous. And then you take Skype, which I think is one of the top 10 telcos, their CapEx requirements are not as much as the others. Again, they're both in theory telcos. So I think service providers have to first look at it and say, where is my true differentiator? So if it is, you're a cable company that also offers voice services, video is the differentiator, so you focus on that, but voice is thrown in, whether it's a commodity, whether it's a bundle, that's one part of it. But then voice, I think, we talk about smart voice, where there's a tendency to always talk about voice as if it's not important, but when you start looking at national infrastructure, when you start looking at E911 requirements, and you talk about always having the security of knowing when you pick up a phone, you have dial tone, that level of capability only a telco with the CapEx and the infrastructure can provide. So I think where we're seeing the industry sort of figure out is, where does the service provider want to play? Do you want to play as a pure service provider from an application perspective? Do you want to be at the network layer? And then there are niche players that are starting to eat out at each of these. So I think the challenge is identifying what is the core competence of the business going forward, and then really putting all your investment dollars into that area and partner with others in the ecosystem.
So based on that, the title of this talk is Experience Matters. Well, experience can be the user experience, but it can also be the telecom experience.
Absolutely.
5 nines reliability, security, hitless failover, geo-redundancy. We've heard about these terms, but they don't come for free.
Correct.
They have to be engineered in. And so just because you have a server farm doesn't mean you get resiliency from day one. You may have load balancing. So, Shalin,
Yes.
From your perspective, how does GENBAND provide some of these capabilities?
So where GENBAND is participating is enabling the service providers to make sure that they can roll out these experiences, collaborative experiences, ensuring that you can start with a voice call and upgrade that to a screen share, for example, right? And then being able to take that experience from your personal computer to a real personal experience, whereby you can just take that session and carry it in your hand on your smartphone, and that to be done seamlessly. Right?
So now I take it that before we would have different departments, you had your user interface department, you had your marketing department, your protocol stack, your network management department, and that's how products got built. But it looks like the organizations may change, that maybe user experience is the one that drives things.
Correct. So you're basically collapsing the OSI layer, right? So you got the layer 4 and up, which is now driving what layer 3 and down need to do. Or I should say layer 5 and up driving what layer 4 and down needs to do.
Now, this is almost like what the Googles and the Skypes and the Apples of the world do. When they build, they have this DevOps style where you develop with recoverability. As long as you don't break anything, you're okay. And you can launch a beta, right. You can, whereas the classical telco model was, rigorously define standards, rigorously, architect things, rigorously test, and things usually, I remember this when I was at Bell Canada, it was the 3 2s for every feature. 2 years, back then it was $2 million, now it's probably 20, and the third 2 was too late. And so, have we now, we talk about service creation, we have heard about service delivery platforms, I've heard about all kinds of things since the 90s. Yeah. Have we really achieved that right now with newer technologies?
So I think the way we have changed the game is by opening up concept of the REST APIs and bringing it into the telecommunication space. And that's where, by the way, we differ than any others who are in the WebRTC gateway space. What we are building is a REST API interface through the WebRTC and then interoping it with the legacy telco, be it SIP, be it PRI, be it SS7.
So if I'm a developer, I don't have to care about SIP or PRI. I
No.
just care about your API.
So JSON and JavaScripting. That's it. And guess how many people are there who can write those scripts?
And Mark, since you're a CIO of a large company, are you planning to have any development of applications like what you need for your force?
Absolutely. We've got about 500 developers right now.
Wow.
And many of them know JSON, know XML. Picking up WebRTC is pretty straightforward. And that's just going to enable them to focus on the experience rather than the underlying technology. Because at the end of the day, the end user doesn't really care how it gets done, just as long as it gets done. But most importantly, does it save them time? Does it make their job easier? Does it help us reduce cost? Those are the factors that we look at.
And do you see that maybe workflows will change based on these APIs, that you don't have to now mimic what you used to do? Maybe you have a whole new workflow process?
Oh, certainly, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. How does the experience change the workflow in your CRM application? How do you do it from the Salesforce application if you're using SFDC, and how do you transfer a lead into a qualified prospect? And how will video and being able to take that session from application to application or technology change the way that people work in the field?
So I have a question for you, Paul. Traditionally, the CIO in a telco, was basically the guy or woman who would buy the servers and the databases, and it was the CTO running things in the telco world. Yeah. Do you see the case where the CIO, with all the server farms and network virtualization and software, that the CIO becomes effectively the CTO of a telco in the future?
So as we look and sell into the service provider space, it really is a combined effort. So it's not just the real estate and the COs that we're concerned about and the number of servers we have to put in because of virtualization, but also the CTO and how it actually the services get operationalized. So to your points earlier, where the APIs are important from an end user perspective, our products today the APIs have been added in so that they can work with the GENBAND core components of their network, so that there's no more swivel chair provisioning, for example, where you provision a voice endpoint on one system and then have to go do the same thing on a virtual meeting room for video, for example. So the common interface into the provisioning systems is very important, and that affects the CTO's business, right?
Now, we've seen this notion called SDN, and it has open flow for holistic management. It has this centralized controller. It can perhaps provision flow tables in multiple networking gear. It might even elastically control bandwidth on some networking gear. We've seen some companies talk about bandwidth on demand with wavelengths on the fly. We've seen some notions of hypervisor-based control of network functions virtualization. Do you see carriers embracing that, Shalin, from day one, or do you see some interoperability or testing, or how do you see that getting rolled out?
So I think I'll comment on layer 4 and up. I'll comment from an SBC point of view.
Sure.
So managed network services, ensuring that the user that is sitting, or the IT administrator that's managing the operation for the IT is able to take care of add, deletes, and mods, and also allow. Actually, I'm losing a train of thought here. Can you move on to the next question?
So, John, at IBM, we talked about CIOs becoming the CTO of the future. Do you have any comments on that?
Not particularly. It's interesting to me the extent to which the lines are being blurred across the different roles inside the organization. IBM traditionally sells or has sold to the CIO office. Today, it's not even the CIO or the CTO, but it's very much line of business that we're in there talking to. We just acquired a company called Connexa for about $1.3 billion, focusing primarily on HR processes and cloud delivery of HR applications. And we're now combining that with our social capabilities, with the voice and video capabilities, and we're approaching the line of business about making those kinds of decisions. And it's one of the interesting aspects about the cloud. It frees up us to go in and deliver those capabilities without requiring the CIO to be quite as tightly integrated as it might have been in the past. But as far as the particular blurring of CTO and CIO, no, I don't know that I'm going to have any good.
And maybe there's a new title, CSO. Maybe they're a Chief Strategy Officer.
I think it's a concept of also a chief product officer. What we're seeing in the service provider space is, yes, like John mentioned, we have sold into the CIO, CTO space. But one of the things we're seeing happen, and I think a lot of it is, we talked about cloud computing, we talked about on-demand computing that IBM talks about, is when you look at what we are doing with our customers, we start to see we're providing a service, it's run from the cloud, and then it runs on multiple devices that the service provider does not control. So you have a device layer, and then you have a service layer in the cloud that we provide to them. So when you go there, there's a tendency to say, okay, what is the architecture of your platform? So we look at it and say, here's the service we enable, here's the experience we enable. So really the people we're talking to are the CEOs, the chief product to service officers. The CIOs and the CTOs are definitely involved because at the end of the day, you have to integrate into the existing infrastructure. So when you look at the work we're doing at someone like a Time Warner Cable or even in AT&T, we are connecting into their back-end systems, and that's very important. But the decision-making is all being done by line of business people that are saying, what is the service that you're enabling? Let's say you're enabling a service where we do something where we help you find the nearest Wi-Fi network for cable customers. And it's very interesting because here we look at what's available from the service provider, their own Wi-Fi hotspots. We also scan the network, the neighborhood to see what else is available, so we can tell you what are the free hotspots. So everything from a user perspective is, here I am, I'm Shalin, I turn on my phone, I click on the solution, and it says what's available. We have two ways to look at it. Either you automatically, through the APIs that Shalin was referring to, is we can do something on Android where we will force you onto the service provider's network, or we could give you an option either that you could monetize that says, hey, we have a partnership, we're AT&T, we have a partnership with Starbucks, so automatically we'll tell you where the Starbucks is. So here again, yes, there is a tremendous amount of technology involved and network people get involved, but we're really offering a service that is, from an experience perspective, very important for our customers. And at some point, I want to come back to the analytics that we found on that, but I'd like the rest of the panel to comment on. We are seeing a shift in the way products and services are being purchased, and I think there's an organizational shift as well. Traditionally, you'd see products that are almost reflective of the service provider's org chart.
Yep.
And that's changing dramatically in the industry today.
So if it's spaghetti code, they probably have a spaghetti org chart.
I'm not going to say that, but you're on your own there. So okay. No, but it's changing, right? I mean, I don't think there's a single answer. I think service providers are smart enough because they understand the shifts in the industry. But it's almost like looking at an aircraft carrier where you can't just change direction. I think in the Navy, if you see a ship 4 kilometers out, it's considered a hit because you can't move your carrier that fast. So I think when you look at the service provider space, there's a lot more planning, there's a lot of moving pieces, multiple parts of the organization are involved when you have 100 million subscribers. But I think we're starting to see more innovation where our customers are saying, this is not a service that needs 5 nines. Because in the App Store, some of the things we do is, if you download an app, there actually is a feature that says re-download, which is an acknowledgement that says something went wrong, let me download. And I think from consumer perspective, okay, to re-download the free app that I'm providing you should be okay, as opposed to me over-engineering it. So I think that's the change the industry is going through right now.
So from a user experience, you mentioned Wi-Fi. Typically we tended to build applications that were sort of protocol specific, network specific. So we would have something for ISDN, or we would have something for GR303, or we would have some apps that were for DSL. And now we're sort of multi-mode, multi-facet, multi-device, multi-access method. Does that create a whole new paradigm shift, Shalin, in development?
It actually does, because you have to account for different devices, different operating systems. And one way to overcome that is obviously you build products that are virtualized. They can run virtually on hypervisor and other products. In addition to that, we are embracing WebRTC, which enables us to offer consistent experience across devices.
Now, I remember hearing about fixed mobile convergence 8, 9 years ago,
Right.
with seamless roaming to Wi-Fi and back. In fact, I became a CTO of a startup doing that, but it failed. And there's been a lot of casualties out there in the market trying to do seamless voice continuity back between Wi-Fi. What went wrong? I mean, what do you, any comments there?
Monetization. Well, I think it's monetization, right? I think at the end of the day, we talk about experience, we talk about services. The Wi-Fi Finder app is a great example. There's a lot of free apps that tell me what the Wi-Fi network around me is. My phone automatically does it. So if you're looking at the experience that the consumer is looking for is, what is, and I think David talked about it in his presentation about the bit always finding the cheapest route, and the thing is, consumers are always going to say, is it easy? And you look at a lot of the applications and services that are popular, Facebook is a great example. If I were to ask the audience, would you pay 99 cents a month for Facebook, you'd see the usage plummet. It's a free service. So I think where we are looking at when you talk about seamless experiences, service providers are growing through the challenge of saying the cable industry, not to put words in their mouth, is investing in Wi-Fi hotspots as an augmentation of their existing customer base. So if you have triple play from Comcast, you have the ability to use my Wi-Fi network when you roam. But you better be paying me 99 bucks a month already. So if you have a company that says, oh, we'll just provide free Wi-Fi, well, at some point, your investors are going to say, well, exactly what is it that you get paid for? So I think that challenge has to be addressed as we evolve as an industry.
Well, we heard about this turbo button idea for a while, where it's HD on demand or HD voice or a stereo sounding voice. Paul, from your perspective, do you see that becoming a part of your product line?
There's a couple of things that we've looked at over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's not so much that it's a turbo button, but it's peering networks that have been set up that actually would handle HD traffic and make sure that it was IP to IP connectivity versus going through, the PSTN gateway or something along that lines.
Do you see, from IBM's perspective, John, there's this notion of cloud bursting where maybe you go from a private cloud to a public cloud, and maybe you want burstability. You want the ability to have not only elasticity of storage and servers, but maybe the pipe becomes elastic. Do you see that becoming a turbo idea?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I want to come back to the concept of the audio conferencing for a moment. We've done some great work with both Polycom and Dolby on the 3D audio conferencing and the spatial audio conferencing. And we took that to our CIO in charge of audio conferencing. We do about 2.5 billion minutes of audio conferencing a year just inside the company. And we said, what do you think of this experience? And the question was, how fast can I get it? It was really amazing, some of the work they've done and the ability to line up the voices essentially along an arc. So you can space them out like you're at a cocktail party. Instead of everybody arguing over each other and it's just a garbled mess, you could tell where everybody was and what they were saying. It was an absolutely amazing experience.
And so, Mark, being a CIO, would that be a feature that you'd want, maybe having an elastic capability of, let's say, pay-per-usage or pay-per-view?
Yeah, we actually have a solution internally where, in the mobile computing example that I talked about earlier, where we can expand to an internal cloud that we have as demand varies. And we've had plenty of thoughts and discussions around how do we expand out to a public cloud, either offered by a service provider or by another application cloud provider. We're just not there yet, but certainly discussions are happening.
One of our studies at Gartner, I co-authored a note a year ago, and we found with our enterprise folks, there's still a whole lot of ISD and PRI in the ground. I was shocked to see somewhere like 80, 85% of businesses still run on ISDN. When do we cut that umbilical cord? Paul, any comments?
We can cut it tomorrow. I don't think that's going to happen. We still have a number of ISDN-enabled conference rooms. We still enable our video bridging with ISDN capabilities. So there's a lot of it out there, and as long as the bandwidth and the controllability are required, we'll continue to do that.
Do you think with Carrier Ethernet CE 2.0, with reliability and class of service, and SIP, and having the resiliency of whatever MPLS, or do you see that maybe helping, Shalin?
I think maybe it's the user experience that's going to drive the enterprise CIOs to cut the cord there. And secondly, you heard yesterday from the CIO panel that they would like to outsource as much of communication as they can in the hands of the service providers. So I think it's the user experience that's going to drive that. But you're right that the plumbing is already there to be able to do that.
Well, there were some issues before about QoS or reliability or security, but I guess SBCs at both ends can solve it as well.
Absolutely, and the fact that you do have a mobile device as a backup, right? So you can take the initial hit if you have to take the initial hit because you have a fallback in the mobile device.
Well, we got a few minutes left. I thought maybe I'll open it up to the audience to see if there's any questions that you may have. See any hands? Nope. Let's see.
Boy, we were good.
We were that entertaining.
We were that entertaining. We answered all the questions.
We were brilliant.
Amazing. Any questions? Cynthia, you've got a question, I'm sure.
Okay, I'll ask a question. What is the coolest WebRTC application you've seen out there so far?
Okay, I'll repeat the question from Cynthia Arton. What is the coolest WebRTC app that's out there? Shalin?
Oh, the one we are demoing outside. It's on my hand device here too.
Any other comments on that?
We can't top that.
What's that?
I said we can't top that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
That's right.
Any other questions? We have a question right here. I got, what's the panel's view on?
Okay, what's the panel's view on the impact of LTE and the bandwidth it brings, and in the context of customer experience? Because with LTE now you can really increase the customer experience in mobile networks.
Yeah, so you have 10 megabit per second or more with LTE, so you're almost getting Wi-Fi speeds, but you have roaming, you have QoS, you should have some security as well built in. So any takers on what does LTE bring?
So I think you answered most of the reasons why LTE is so important for the seamless customer experience. I think we are also demoing the fact that you can go from a wired internet-based application and you hit your Samsung device. I don't have one with me because nobody gave me one yet. But you did the tactile. It's called the tactile, right? And you click on that, and suddenly you see the experience move over to the LTE. I think that experience you can see today.
I think to BG's point, the greater bandwidth allows you to create a better experience. I think this morning Balan Nair was talking about the fact that when he's talking about 4K and 8K TV, you're going to have a tremendous increase in bandwidth consumption, bandwidth constraints, not to mention when you're bobbing around networks. So I think that's why service providers have an advantage where you say, let's say you're AT&T or Verizon LTE, you have a great opportunity to build a differentiated service where you literally can showcase that these are the services that are available when you're in network or you're part of the triple pay bundle or you're a business class user. And then you can differentiate the pricing to say, hey, everybody gets basic communication and basic service, but you almost go from, like black and white television to 3D immersive experience. And that allows service providers to build monetization models that are going to be the way you recover. I mean, LTE is an incredible investment from a CapEx perspective. So I think service providers are looking for what are the differentiated services. And I think where experience matters is that it gives you the ability to say, for business users, this is the kind of experience, and whether it's QoS defined or not, you can actually say you will pay $9.99 for this service, and then $4.99 for not a bad service, but a less level of service, and then the basic service is free. So there's always going to be, because the consumers have been, whether they're addicted to it or not, I can get a basic level of service for free. So you have to show me on an LTE network what's the cool part that allows me to pay for it, and I think service providers are focused on that.
Right, I think AT&T is at today on connected car, right? The connected auto and the connected home was a classic example of how they'll go up the food chain.
Great. Well, on that note, we're about 30 seconds over, so I want to thank the panel and thank the audience for great questions as well. So thank you. Great.